What the fuck's going on here? Why is it not showing up? Oh, there we go. Right, we're live. Good evening, people. Welcome to episode 2 of Before Dracula, the History of Vampires. I am joined tonight by a special guest, my sister. Say hello.
Hello. Hello, everyone.
Welcome to Before Dracula. How's it going?
It's going alright, thank you.
Good. Right on. So, this episode is going to be the final episode on vampires in ancient history. We're going to be going on to more modern history, looking at Bram Stoker's Dracula. So that'll be fun. But yeah, so where are we? Spent so long writing the blooming script for this one because I didn't realise that, you have to put lines in for a speaker. I'm a bit of a special kind of idiot. Right. I don't know how we're going to do this because my sister hasn't got the script. So we're going to have to sort of take in turns on reading this. So I suppose we just get on, really.
Terror. The fear that order could fail, and when it did, something unnatural would slip through the cracks.
This episode is not just about fantastical monsters lurking at the edge of civilization, but it's about fear living comfortably at the very heart of Roman life. Fear that existed in bedrooms, at cradles, in graveyards, and the quiet hours of the night. Fear that was not challenged by law, not denied by religion, and not dismissed by philosophy. The Romans didn't ask whether the undead were real, they asked whether belief in them disrupted society. Most of the time, it didn't. And that's why Rome matters so deeply to the history of vampires.
Roman culture accepted that death was dangerous. Not because death itself was frightening, but because death could go wrong. A person who died violently, too young, without burial, or without proper ritual, did not simply cease to exist. They became unstable, unfinished, a problem that the living might have to deal with later. This idea that death required careful management shaped everything from burial customs to household rituals. It shaped how Romans treated memory, ancestry, and obligation, and it shaped how they imagined the death.
In Rome, the dead were not automatically at rest, they had to be made so. And if that process failed, the consequences were not symbolic or abstract. They were immediate, personal, and terrifying. Throughout this episode, we're going to explore how Roman society created the perfect conditions for the vampire myth to take root. Not through invention, not through preservation, not through belief, but through habit. We will look at how Roman homes became spaces of quiet fear, how infant death led to the creation of blood-drinking night creatures, how restless spirits were classified, ritualized, and scheduled, and how Roman law, of all things, in choosing silence allowed superstition to survive untouched. Because when Rome eventually collapsed, its road crumbled and its laws faded, but its fears remained. And those fears would be inherited by the medieval world, transformed by Christianity and sharpened into something far more recognisable, something hungry.
To understand why Rome is so important to vampire mythology, we need to step back and look at what Rome actually did differently from the cultures that came before it. Before Rome, fear of the restless dead was local. A village feared its own ghosts, a culture feared spirits shaped by its own traditions. These beliefs rarely travelled far because the societies that created them did not travel far. Rome changed that completely. Rome was not an empire, it was a network. Roads connected distant provinces. Soldiers from different religions lived side by side. Traders, slaves, officials, and pilgrims carried stories wherever they went. Belief moved with people, and as belief moved, it merged.
This is where fear becomes durable. When multiple cultures tell similar stories about the dead, about spirits that return, about night creatures that drain life, about improper death creating danger, those stories reinforce each other. They stop being local superstitions and start looking like universal truths.
Rome did not deliberately spread superstition. In fact, Roman writers often approached supernatural belief with skepticism. But skepticism did not ease fear. Writing something down preserved it. Even mockery kept it alive. An unwritten belief fades. A written belief survives centuries.
Roman authors catalogued strange customs, recorded folklore, and described creatures like the Strix and Lemures, where not because they believed in them, but because they existed in social realities. People acted as if these things were real, and action mattered more than belief. Rome also placed enormous importance on ancestry and memory. The dead were not gone, they were part of the household. Not a part of identity, part of obligation. This meant that death was not a clean break, it was a transition that required such careful supervision.
If the transition failed, the dead could return. This idea that the undead are the result of failure than evil. In one of Rome's most important contributions to vampire mythology. The Roman undead are not demons from another realm. They are humans whose deaths went wrong. This framework will later allow the vampire to evolve. Hunger, sin, and corruption can only exist once, and the undead are still recognisably human.
Rome did not invent vampires, but it created the conditions that allowed them to exist across cultures, languages, and centuries. In ancient Rome, death was not a private affair. Funeral processions moved openly through the streets. Mourners wore visible signs of grief. Tombs were deliberately placed along roads leading out of cities, ensuring that the living would pass the dead every single day. Memory was enforced through geography.
This was not accidental. Romans believed that the dead required recognition. To be forgotten was not just sad, it was dangerous. A person who died without proper burial or remembrance was at risk of becoming restless. Burial rites were therefore essential. They were not acts of sentiment, but acts of protection. The living performed rituals not only to honour the dead, but to ensure that the dead remained where they belonged.
This belief shaped Roman anxiety around death. People feared dying far from home, they feared dying unnamed. They feared not being claimed by family. These fears were not about the afterlife. These fears were about the consequences of neglect. A forgotten dead person had unfinished business, and unfinished things returned.
The Roman undead were not imaginated as villains. They were imaginated as consequences. Proof that something in the social or ritual order had failed. This shifted responsibility onto the living. If the dead rose, it was because someone had failed them. This idea would become foundational to later vampire lore. The vampire is not evil by nature, it is corrupted by circumstance, neglect, or moral failure. In Rome, the dead did not thirst for blood yet, but they were already dangerous.
Among all creatures feared in ancient Rome, none come closer to the modern idea of the vampire than the Strix. The word Strix originally referred to a screech owl, a nocturnal bird whose cry was believed to herald death or disaster. Unlike the owl of Athena in Greek culture, which symbolised wisdom, the Roman owl was an omen. It belonged to the night. I've lost where I was. Ah, brain. Help. Oh, this is bad. Right. It belonged to the night, to liminal spaces, to moments when the world felt unstable. Over time, that bird became something far more frightening.
Roman writers described the Strix as a creature that flew by night, entered homes silently, and fed on human life, especially the lives of infants. It was in Roman thought the liver was associated with vitality and life force, early to kill, but to extinguish life as its source. The Strix was not a story told for entertainment, it was an explanation. Infant mortality in the Roman world was tragically common. Children often died suddenly without warning or visible injury. There was no understanding of infection. Congenital infant death, and a dead one discovered in the morning.
When no natural explanation...
It explained why death happened at night. It explained why there were no wounds. It explained why life could be taken so quietly. And crucially, it explained why death seemed to target the most vulnerable. As a result, Roman household metaphor, they treated it as a threat.
Iron objects were placed near cradles, amulets were hung in sleeping areas, certain words were avoided after dark. Doors and windows were secured more carefully at night than during the day. These were not acts of panic, they were habits, passed down and rarely questioned.
Descriptions of the Strix also reveal deep social anxieties. The creature was often portrayed as female, sometimes as a woman who could transform into a bird. It was associated with witchcraft, liminality, and women who lived outside traditional family structures. This reflects a familiar pattern in fear mythology. When danger cannot be controlled, it is given a human shape. Outsiders, healers, midwives, widows, anyone who existed at the edges of social order could become a suspect.
The Strix did not seduce, it did not charm, it did not promise immortality, it invaded. This is the vampire before romance, before aristocracy, before gothic glamour. It is raw, practical and terrifying. A creature born not from fantasy, but from grief and helplessness. And once the idea of a blood-drinking night creature enters cultural memory, it never truly leaves.
To understand why belief in creatures like the Strix became so entrenched, we need to understand the Roman home. The Roman domus was not just a place to live, it was a sacred space protected by household gods, ancestral spirits, and ritual boundaries. The home represented order, continuity, and safety. To violate it was to violate the family itself.
And yet, it was within the home that Romans experienced their most profound vulnerability. Illness entered quietly, death arrived without warning, and nowhere was this more devastating than in the deaths of children.
Infant mortality was not an abstract statistic. It was a lived reality. Parents expected loss, but that expectation did not make it easier. The most disturbing deaths were those that happened at night during sleep when nothing appeared to be wrong. Sleep became dangerous. Parents learned to listen for breathing. Silence became terrifying. The boundary between rest and death blurred.
This fear shaped behaviour. Nighttime was treated differently from daytime. Certain activities were avoided, protective objects were kept close, the household was subtly transformed into a defensive space. What matters here is not whether Romans truly believed in monsters. What matters is that they behaved as if something could cross the boundary between inside and outside, between the night and the home, and take life.
This belief is foundational to vampire mythology. The vampire is defined by trespass. It enters where it does not belong. It violates a private space. It attacks while its victims are most vulnerable. That idea begins here, not in castles or graveyards, but in bedrooms and cradles. The Roman undead did not need to announce themselves. They did not need witnesses. They left no marks that could be understood. They took life silently. And silence is what makes fear endure, because silence cannot be argued with.
Place where the supernatural was neither invited nor denied, simply managed. Fear became domestic, routine, and inherited. This is how monsters survive.
Not all Roman fears of the dead involved blood. Some were quieter, more persistent, and arguably more unsettling. The lemures were restless spirits, the dead who had not found peace due to improper burial. Sudden death or unresolved obligations. Unlike later vampires, lemures were not imagined as powerful predators. They were disturbing because they were familiar. They were former family members, former neighbours, former citizens. The lemures did not return to punish the living out of malice. They returned because something had gone wrong.
This belief placed responsibility firmly on the living. If the dead were restless, it was because they had been failed, forgotten, neglected, or improperly honoured. Larvae, by contrast, were more malevolent. Roman writers described them as disruptive spirits associated with madness, fear, and harm. Some sources blurred the line between lemure and larvae, suggesting that neglected spirits could grow more dangerous over time. This idea is critical. It introduces progression.
The dead do not return fully formed as monsters. They become worse though, neglect. Restlessness turns into hostility. Memory turns into hunger. This is a psychological ancestor of vampirism. The Roman undead are not evil by nature. They are the result of broken systems, social, familiar, ritual. They embody the fear that failing the past creates danger in the present. This belief ensured that fear never disappeared as long as humans failed one another. As long as burials were missed, names forgotten, rituals rushed, the undead would remain possible, and possibly is enough.
Rome did not attempt to eliminate fear of the dead, it ritualized it. Once a year, Roman households observed Lemuria, a nocturnal ritual designed to appease and expel restless spirits. This was not a public celebration, it was private, solemn, and deliberately unsettling.
The head of the household rose barefoot at night, symbolically separating himself from the earth. Black beans were thrown behind the shoulder while incantations were spoken, offering the beans as substitutes for the living themselves. The dead were acknowledged, appeased, and dismissed. This ritual tells us something essential about Roman belief. The dead were not denied, they were negotiated with.
Fear was given structure. It was allowed to exist, but only within controlled boundaries. Lemuria ensured that belief in restless spirits was passed down as tradition. Children learned that the dead were real enough to require action, but predictable enough to manage. This balance allowed fear to survive without destabilizing society. And if anything survives, that ritual survives indefinitely. By this point in the episode, we followed the Strix form from whispered superstition to something far darker. A figure feared not only in homes and nurseries, but increasingly in public spaces. And this is where things take a disturbing turn, because once a myth enters the legal system, it stops being a story and starts becoming a weapon.
Exactly, this is a moment where belief stops being private and starts being enforced. The Strix doesn't just live in folklore anymore, it becomes something you can be accused of. In ancient societies, particularly Rome, law and belief were never truly separate. Roman law wasn't only about property or citizenship, it also dealt with mortality, religion, and perceived threats to social order. While there was no single anti-Strix law, accusations of witchcraft, poisoning, or harmful magic were taken extremely seriously.
And that's the key point. The Strix didn't need to be named directly. The legal language was broad enough that anybody could fall into it.
Exactly. Laws such as Lex Cornelia, I can't
Desicaris
pronounce.
Veneficis. I can't even pronounce that either. I'm sure I'm going to get butchered in the comments for that.
Anyway, back to it. Originally designed to punish poisoners and assassins, became a catch-all for supernatural fear. If a child died mysteriously, if livestock perished overnight, if illness struck without explanation, suspicion followed, and suspicion needed a target. The Strix became that target.
What's chilling is how often the accused were women, especially older women, midwives, healers, or those living on the fringes of society.
Ooh. Yeah, the Strix myth fit perfectly into existing social anxieties. Roman society valued order, lineage, and male authority. Women who existed outside those structures, widows, unmarried women, foreigners, and were already viewed with suspicion. The Strix gave legal and moral justification to punish them.
And once belief is legitimised by law, evidence becomes, well, flexible.
That's putting it lightly, isn't it?
Roman
trials relied heavily on testimony and reputation. If enough people believed you could be a Strix, that belief itself became evidence. Physical proof wasn't required. A bad reputation, an argument with a neighbour, or simply surviving too long could be enough.
There's something deeply unsettling about that. I mean, the idea that belief itself becomes fact.
And this is where the myth stops being symbolic and starts becoming, well, deadly. The Strix was no longer just a story to scare children, but it was just a framework for blame. When society didn't understand something, it reached for the supernatural. Law simply followed fear.
What's fascinating and horrifying is how this legal mindset echoes forward through history.
Oh, absolutely. You can draw a direct line from Roman legal superstition to medieval witch trials. The language changes, the gods change, but the structure remains the same. Unexplained suffering plus fear equals accusation.
And this is where we start to see the Strix transforming from a Roman night demon into something much closer to the witches of later Europe.
Which brings us back, inevitably, to Greece, because long before Rome codified fear into law, Greek philosophy... totally pronounced
You mean
that.
philosophy?
Same thing.
I don't know what philosophy is.
Oh, it's fine. Wrestled with a question Rome never truly answered, though. What happens when belief overrules reason?
And in the next section, we'll explore how the Strix evolves beyond Roman courts and how its shadows stretches into medieval Europe, changing names but never losing its power. By the time the Roman world began to fracture, the Strix didn't disappear. It changed, and this is something myths are very, very good at. They adapt, they survive collapse, conquest, and conversation. As empires fall and new belief systems rise, old fears simply put on new masks.
That's right. The Strix is a perfect example of mythological evolution. When Rome declined and Christianity spread across Europe, the supernatural landscape didn't rest. It merged... Don't laugh. Oh dear.
Shoot me, please.
It merged pagan creatures. Erased.
I'm sorry.
They were reclassified.
And that reclassification was almost always darker.
Well, yeah. Medieval Christianity. Christianity had little tolerance for
Oh, you got that one right. I need to make it simple words for simple brains, I think. Anyway.
Back to this. Spirits were no longer morally complex. They were either divine or demonic, and the Strix, with its night feeding, shape-shifting, and predatory nature, fit seamlessly into the category of evil.
This is where we see a critical transformation. The Strix becomes less animal, less spirit, and more human.
Yep. In medieval folklore, the Strix begins to resemble the witch. She no longer simply appears as a bird. She is a woman who becomes one. This distinction matters, because once a monster can wear a human face, anyone can be accused of being it.
Hang on. You're a woman. So that means in medieval times, I could call you a witch if I didn't like you.
I could have been burnt.
Oh, bollocks. Wrong generation, I guess. And this is where the fear really takes root.
Absolutely. Medieval Europe was a time of immense uncertainty. Famine, plague, infant mortality, and war were constant
Realities.
Same thing.
Yeah. No, realities are kind of almost a, estate agent's term.
People needed explanations when children died in their sleep or communities were struck by illness. Well, that could have just been anything. That could have been a cold going round.
Well, yeah, they basically thought that, even for a time during the Black Plague, they were basically, oh, it's vampires, it's the Strix.
It's always vampires.
I mean, there was even something I saw in a history lesson once that basically somebody put a disease down to a disease called teeth.
Oh.
Yeah, fun.
Well, the supernatural offered answers when medicine could not.
My point.
There you go. The Strix, now entwined with witchcraft, became a convenient explanation for tragedy.
What's striking is how closely these stories mirror early Roman descriptions.
Very closely. Medieval texts describe witches who fly at night, drink blood, steal infants. Well, that's Rapunzel, isn't it? And gather in secret.
That's Rapunzel, isn't it? Okay, sure.
The evil mother.
Oh yeah, shit.
These are not new ideas. They're echoes. The Strix never left. It was simply absorbed into Christian demonology.
And once again, women bore the weight of this transformation.
Yep. The medieval Strix, which was almost always female.
Sexist.
Well, no. This reflects deep-rooted anxieties about women's bodies, autonomy. Yep. And perceived moral weakness. Women who lived alone, practiced healing, or existed outside traditional family structures were viewed as dangerous.
So basically they were sat with a Minecraft brewing stand, brewing potions of healing and just chilling.
Basically.
Sound. There's also the owl imagery, which persists long after its original meaning fades.
The owl is fascinating here.
Isn't it just?
Who? In earlier cultures, it was a symbol of wisdom or
Liminality.
Thank you. A
You're
creature
welcome.
between worlds in medieval Europe, it became a symbol of darkness and death. An owl near a home was no longer just a bird, it was an omen.
Creepy. And Strix was now firmly associated with the devil.
Yep. Well, medieval...
Devil's lettuce, anyone?
Medieval
Theology. God, I really need to change these scripts for simple brains.
Are bad. These are bad.
You saying my script writing is bad?
Depends.
Officially offended.
Reframed pagan spirits as servants of Satan. The Strix witch was said to attend Sabbaths, made pacts, and renounce God. These accusations weren't based on evidence, they were built on inherited fear.
Which leads us to something terrifyingly familiar.
Well, the witch trials.
Which ones? The Salem witch trials?
Yeah.
Yeah, fun. Not fun. For the people involved, I mean.
Yeah.
Whoops.
While they peaked later, the foundation was laid here. The Strix myth helped create the blueprint, a nocturnal female predator, blamed for misfortune, condemned through belief rather than proof.
And what began as folklore becomes mass hysteria.
Well, this is the danger of unresolved myths. When fear is inherited but never questioned, it grows sharper with every generation.
In this next section, we'll explore how this myth didn't just survive. It spread across borders, languages and centuries, leaving behind a trail of familiar monsters and very real victims. By the late Middle Ages, the Strix was no longer a single creature tied to Rome or Greece. It had fractured, multiplied, spreading across Europe under dozens of different names. But while the language changed, the fear stayed the same.
This is one of the most important things to understand about vampire folklore. It isn't one story, it's a whole network. A web of regional myths all sharing the same bones.
And those bones are old.
Very. Like, ancient old.
Damn. That's old.
As trade routes expanded, wars displaced populations and Christianity
Close enough.
spread across Europe. Stories travelled with people. The Strix didn't migrate as a name. It migrated as, well, an idea, a thought.
Something like a nocturnal predator, a being that feeds on blood or life force, a creature blamed for sudden death, especially of children, right?
Exactly. Well, in Greece, the Strix's closest cousin was the Lamia, a female demon who devoured children. In the Balkans, we see the rise of, here we go, your pronunciation.
Vircolicus.
In Slavic regions, the
Slavic regions. Yeah. The Upua Ostrigoi.
Romania, of course, gives us the... I'm not going to do these.
The Striga. A linguistic descendant of Strix itself. And that connection is chilling.
It really is. The Romanian Striga...
Or Strigoi.
Okay. Aren't just similar. They're direct evolutions, the name survives nearly unchanged, even as the creature shifts from a spirit into something corporeal, a Walking Dead.
This is where vampires start to feel more familiar.
Yeah, well, by this point, the Strix has gained a body, no longer just a night demon or shapeshifter. It becomes a reanimated corpse, pale, bloated, feeding on living. This change reflects medieval Europe's obsession with death and decay.
Especially during plagues, like I mentioned earlier.
Oh, absolutely. When the entire villages died without explanation, people began exhuming bodies. They found corpses that hadn't decomposed as expected, bloated from gases, and, everything else with the blood at the mouth, the modern science. This is natural to medieval villagers. It was proof.
And it was sort of proof that the dead were feeding on the living.
Exactly. The Strix myth provided the framework to interpret what they were seeing. This is how folklore becomes forensic. People start looking for physical evidence to confirm their belief, really.
And these punishments were brutal.
They were. Bodies were staked, decapitated, burned, mouths were stuffed with stones and bricks to prevent feeding. These practices weren't random, they followed established folklore, rules passed down through, generations again.
Now, either they had a kink for impaling people and stuffing their mouths with stuff, but that just meant that myth had authority.
Folklore functioned as law in many rural communities. Priests, elders, of course, it's passed down. Even local courts sanctioned these acts. Belief became a policy.
And again, what's striking is how often women were blamed. God, history is so sexist at times.
Well, we were always the problem.
What's happened here? We finally had someone admit it. I've got proof.
Well, we've always been blamed for all of it. We're all witches, apparently.
Yeah, I did see the broom in your room.
That's for cleaning purposes.
You bullshit.
Folklore functioned as law in many rural communities, as I said. Consistently, female vampires were believed to be more dangerous. They were said to seduce, drain, corrupt. The medieval fear of female sexuality fused with the Strix ancient hunger.
So by the time we reach Eastern Europe, the Strix has become something else entirely.
Well, it's become the vampire we now picture today. Not yet romantic, but terrifyingly physical. A monster born from fear, misunderstanding, and inherited myth.
And we're getting closer to a very specific place.
Exactly. Because all roads...
linguistic, folkloric, and historical.
are now pointing towards Transylvania.
In this next section, we'll step into that region and we'll meet the creature that finally gives the Strix its most famous face. Oh boy, I can't wait for this. This is my favourite section of history. Oh wait, we're not on to the lad yet.
They've got some of the best movies,
Yeah, some are good. Twilight, what? Yeah, that's
Transylvania. Free.
Anyway, if the Strix spent centuries changing shape, then Romania is where it finally found a body. This is the land where whispers became accusations and folklore became ritual.
And importantly, this isn't fiction. Roman vampire belief wasn't a story told for entertainment. It was lived reality. People acted on it.
The word itself tells us everything. Strigoi, linguistically tied to the Latin strix, a scream, a night creature, a restless spirit.
Oh dear.
Creepy.
Yep. And Roman folklore distinguishes between two types.
Strigoi 7, the living Strigoi.
And Strigoi Morti. One of the two. The dead that alone shows how deeply ingrained that belief was.
So let's start with the living.
Oh, well.
The Strigoi 7
were believed to be born, not made. They were often identified by physical markers,
call at birth.
Thank you. A call at birth, a tail-like appendage, mismatched eyes, or unusual behaviour. These individuals were thought to leave their bodies at night, feeding on livestock, draining neighbours, and causing illnesses.
God, that's creepy, because it means that the monster could literally have been your neighbour.
Yeah, could have been your best mate.
Oh shit, I should start carrying a wooden stake and garlic and stuff.
Oh, garlic doesn't affect all good vampires.
Oh, sorry, I forget you've been watching the Vampire Diaries, and
I have.
Stephen Salvatore loves garlic.
He does, actually.
God, his abs.
Did I hear that right? Well, they don't age a day. Be wrong if you was 50.
Right, get on.
That. Well, the belief created intense paranoia, a bad harvest, a sudden fever, a child wasting away. All of it could be blamed on someone living around you.
And then there are the dead.
Well.
The Strigoi Mortai
Were far more feared. These people believed to rise from their graves to torment the living. They drained blood, stole breath, spread disease, and weakened entire households.
And unlike earlier spirits, these weren't invisible.
Nope, they were physical. As I said, they could have been your best mate. They could be seen, tracked, stopped, which led to...
Exhumations.
There you go.
Describe what villagers believed they saw.
Well, they would have seen bodies that hadn't decayed, swollen abdomens, blood at the mouth or nose, flexible limbs, but, I mean, you could have been a gymnast, so, you know, anything could be possible. Warmth to modern science. These are signs of natural decomposition. To villagers, it was undeniable proof.
Again, proof that the dead were feeding.
Yep, and once identified, the response was ritualised violence. Stakes through the heart, decapitation, burning, sometimes garlic placed in the mouth, but some can eat them. But iron nails driven into limbs or poppy seeds scattered in graves believed to distract the
Strigoi.
with counting.
Which mirrors ancient superstition almost perfectly.
It does. These aren't random acts, they're inherited rituals. Again, passed down through generations. Each one traces back through centuries of belief, evolving but recognisable.
What's fascinating is how the church responded. Oh, here we go.
So officially, the church condemned these practices. Unofficially, many priests participated, some even led exorcisms of graves. Belief had outpaced doctrine.
God, so priests have always just been weird. Sophia won, basically, is what you're saying.
Fear usually does. Especially when science can't explain what people are seeing.
And once again, women!
Yeah, women were.
Disproportionately accused.
Yeah, well, especially widows. Again, healers. Again. Or those who didn't conform. Again.
Was that the last again?
Yeah, probably. Maybe. The ancient Strix female, predatory, nocturnal, still lingered beneath the surface.
So by the time we reach Transylvania, the Strix is no longer a metaphor.
It's a corpse in the ground that might get up tonight.
And we're now only one step away from the figure who will immortalise this belief forever.
Well, in the next section we meet the man. History didn't intend to turn into a monster, but folklore did it anyway.
God, this is my favourite section in history. I absolutely love this guy. I think he's like such a chill guy. Every legend eventually finds a face, of course, and for the vampire myth, that face belongs to one man.
Well,
Vlad the Impaler.
what's important to say immediately, this Vlad was not a vampire. There is no historical evidence that he drank blood, believed in the undead, or practiced anything resembling supernatural ritual.
And yet, his name is inseparable from the vampire.
Because myths don't need truth, they need symbolism. And Vlad was symbolic in ways that made him irresistible to folklore. I mean, look at the guy.
What? You're not telling me that moustache is not irresistible? That moustache is wicked, man.
Yeah.
But let's start with the facts. Vlad III had ruled Wallachia in the 15th century, a volatile borderland caught between the Ottoman Empire and Christian Europe. His reign was defined by brutality, but also contact.
Exactly.
Wallachia
Was under consistent threat. Vlad ruled through fear because fear was an effective weapon. Impalement,
yeah.
thank you, horrific as it was, served a strategic purpose.
Deterrence. Accounts describe forests of impaled bodies on lining roads.
Yep, and those accounts were often exaggerated. Many came from enemies, particularly Saxon merchants and political rivals who circulated
Pamphlets.
portraying Vlad as a sadistic monster.
God, so they were already into propaganda.
Always propaganda here.
It must have played a huge role.
Oh, yeah, a huge one. These pamphlets spread across Europe thanks to the printing press, one of the first examples of mass media
Demonization.
Yes.
And the imagery stuck, as it seems.
Well, it did. Blood, death, corpses, night rays, these align perfectly with existing vampire folklore. Vlad didn't create the myth, but he became, well, the vessel for it, really.
There's also the name.
Yep. Dracula comes from Dracula.
Dracula, yeah.
Thank you. Meaning dragon or devil. Vlad's father belonged to the Order of the Dragon, but to a superstitions population, son of the devil carried darker implications.
As it would, especially in a land already steeped in Strigoi belief.
Precisely. Roman folklore already believed the dead could return, that violent deaths preceded restless spirits. Vlad's cruelty didn't create fear of the undead, it confirmed it, really.
So when people later spoke of monsters rising in Transylvania...
They had a name already.
But the transformation wasn't immediate, right?
No, for centuries, Vlad was remembered as a brutal ruler, sometimes even a folk hero, for resisting the Ottomans. The vampire connection came much later.
Through literature. I can't English today.
I can't England either. Exactly. When 19th century writers went searching for a vampire myth, they found Transylvania. They found Strigoi legends, and they found a ruler whose reputation was soaked in blood.
And history became horror.
Yep. Vlad became a symbol, not of who he was, but of what people already feared. He was the embodiment of centuries of superstition, the Strix given a crown.
Which raises an uncomfortable question.
It does. How often do we turn real people into monsters because they fit a story we already want to tell?
And how often do myths survive because they attach themselves to human faces?
Well, almost always.
Well, that's because once legend has a name, it stops being abstract.
And it becomes, well, immortal.
In our final section of the podcast, we'll step into a place where myth, tourism and modern imagination collide. Bran Castle, which I think is one of the most beautiful buildings on the planet. And it's so steeped in history. One little fact about Bran Castle, and I'm going off script slightly here, is that it's the only building on Earth to have never been invaded.
I know this one. That's what it's based on.
It's
Transylvania.
No, not quite. But
Well,
they did sort of take that for nearly every Dracula film. But it's the only castle to have never come under siege, and it's been up for nearly 1,000 years.
Wow. Well, I got proved wrong. Apparently it's not in Hotel Transylvania.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm a nerd.
They look
But
the
in our
same.
final section, we step into the place where myth, tourism and modern imagination collide, Bran Castle, and ask whether vampires still haunt us, or whether we carry them forward ourselves. We're in this journey where many believe the vampire story begins, but where in truth it simply converges. Bran Castle stands on a ridge in Transylvania, framed by mist, forest, and imagination. It feels ancient, watchful, alive with stories.
Well, I mean, if I looked at that and I seen mist around in it, I'd go, heck no.
I mean,
Time
how
it.
cool is that?
It's nice, don't get me wrong, but when it's full of trees, mist, I'm going to be like, heck no. There are definitely vampires in there. But, yeah,
Lol.
historically,
Holy
the
water!
connection to vampires, again, is almost non-existent. Vlad the Impaler likely never lived here. There's no evidence of blood rituals or supernatural events, but belief doesn't require accuracy. It requires atmosphere.
See, I disagree with that statement because looking upon history, and again, this is going off of context and off of the, well, not off context, but it's going off script. Vlad did, in fact, live there. That was his primary residence up until the Ottomans started attacking Transylvania and Wallachia. But
Then, if they started attacking it, there would be no proof that he lived there.
yeah, but it never actually fell under siege. They never captured it.
Ah.
But it makes Castle the perfect mirror for everything we've discussed thus far.
Exactly, this place didn't create the myth, it absorbed it. Just like Rome absorbed Greek. The Strix, a creature blamed for child deaths, illnesses, and unexplained suffering.
Which raises a very important point.
The Strix wasn't born from superstition alone, it was born from grief, from fear, from the human need to make sense of loss.
And every era reshaped that fear using the tools that it had.
The Greeks had myths, the Romans had law, medieval Europe had religion, Transylvania had ritual. The modern world has tourism, fiction, and pop culture.
And really great food, apparently.
Yes.
But the emotional core of it never changed, did it?
No. We still fear the unseen. We still look for villains when tragedy strikes. We still romanticise darkness while pretending we've outgrown it.
Which is why Castle matters, not as proof of vampires, but as proof of us.
It shows how easily history becomes story, and story becomes belief. Visitors don't come here seeking facts, they come here seeking feeling, the chill, the possibility.
And that's what most honest legacy of the Strix.
Yep. Not that monsters exist, but that belief does, and belief shapes behaviour, law, violence, and your memory.
Just as it did when Roman parents nailed owls to doors, just as it did when the medieval villagers exhumed graves, just as it did when pamphlets turned a ruler into a demon.
And just as it does now, when we stand in the shadow of the castle and feel watched, even when we know better than that.
So the question isn't, do vampires exist?
Is why do we keep resurrecting them?
Because the Strix never needed wings, or fangs, or blood.
It needed fear.
And fear, unlike monsters, never dies.
It just changes, well, shape.
In the next episode of Before Dracula, we move forward into Enlightenment, where reason challenged a vampire and nearly lost. But that's all for now. I'd like to thank my special guest. Can I use your name on YouTube?
Of course.
I'd like to thank my special guest Lucy for joining me on this
Okay.
adventure through history.
And you're very welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining me. We've had a blast.
Even though my pronunciations were definitely off. But
Yes, Lucy's learned how to England tonight, and I've remembered how to. So, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you for joining me.
that's very welcome.
And we'll see you all in the next episode. Bye-bye for now.